5 a.m. in the morning, and there's a trucker, and that trucker is driving along 5th Avenue in Anchorage, and what he finds is 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. She explains that first of all, this man approaches her, he offers her $200 for oral sex. She's going to take that, of course. She gets into the car, and it's at this point he puts handcuffs on one of her wrists. So when the opportunity arises, she just climbs into the driver's seat, and it must have taken incredible courage to do this. She escapes through the driver's door. And bear in mind, at this moment, she's handcuffed and she's wearing no shoes, so she's ill-equipped for escaping. And this is when the trucker sees her, and this is when he stops because he's concerned about her appearance, and he takes her to the nearby Mush Inn hotel, and that's where she waits for the police. I mean, this is case closed, job done. Authorities have all the information that they require. A victim, so witness, another witness to odd behaviour, and an individual who can give you every piece of information that you could ever crave as an investigator to bring an individual to justice, right? That's where we'd imagine this will go. So the authorities do go ahead, they trace the owner of the plane, and they then match the person's car to the person it's registered to as well. Also, turns out it matches the details that Cindy gave them. She also picks him out of police photographs. So clearly, this is your guy. And the man in question turns out to be a Robert C. Hansen. So the police go and visit Hansen's home and they question him. And what happens is Hansen just says, yeah, I didn't do that. I didn't abduct her. I didn't rape her. Actually, the reality is, if you want to know the truth about the situation, she's made it up because I have refused to pay her a large amount of cash that she had demanded. Also, it turns out that he's able to provide an apparent solid alibi. So 2 friends vouched for his whereabouts during the time in question. But no, why do that when you can just neatly say it's just a sex worker who's basically blackmailing this nice guy, blindsiding, ridiculous, but true. So they're like, we can't take her seriously. She had basically narrowly escaped the clutches of a man who had come to be known as the Butcher Baker. Hansen was born in 1939. He was born to Danish immigrants, Christian and Edna. And he grew up in Esterville, Iowa. They settled in Pocahontas. Sorry, I thought that was a Disney movie. I'm not going to lie. But this is where they actually settled, and now I feel I want to settle there as well. Hansen was the oldest of 2 sons, and he didn't have very many friends as he was growing up. He was also bullied at school. So he has a stutter, it alienates him, but also he has terrible acne, and it was really severe acne, which is highly distressing for any teenager and child. It really is, and it left his skin very scarred. One of the things that people noted about him, even when he was young, was that he was deeply resentful of the fact that attractive girls at school just were not interested in him. And that is something that can create a seething, a festering. He believes that there is a failure in those girls to not find him attractive. And yeah, we all agree it's sad that some people don't get to win in the looks game, but many of them create the most unbelievable characters, personalities, skills that make them super attractive. His parents owned a bakery, and this meant that when he wasn't at school, his dad was constantly making him work really long hours in the bakery, and then he paid him just 25 cents to $1 a week, which is literally slave labor beyond belief. But he has a particular pastime that he really connects with, and he really does connect with this, and that's hunting. But it's not just the killing that he wants, it's the hunt that appeals to him. That's where he plays out his fantasies. That's where he's feeling vibrant, vital, important, powerful. However, when he was out hunting, there is absolutely no way that anyone could have imagined the use that he would later put those skills to, or just how far his incredibly warped fantasies would go. Certainly didn't have a problem hitting a target. No doubt that's because of the considerable prior hunting experience, but he's got a real talent for it. Also at this time, he also volunteers as an assistant drill sergeant at a police academy in Pocahontas. With respect, what are we seeing at this moment in time? An individual who craves some kind of power and authority. The moment he has this little bit of confidence, because now he has titles and meaning to his community that he didn't have before, he starts sleeping with prostitutes. He has a really poor belief system about who these women are and what they represent. December that year, he and his friend, they set fire to a school bus garage. So this shows really low impulse control. And also, it shows an entitlement and arrogance. You didn't serve me well. I am going to take this out on you by burning this bus garage. This leads to him getting sentenced to 3 years in prison. Now, whilst he is in prison, Hansen gets diagnosed with manic depression with periodic schizophrenic episodes. So manic depression is now known as bipolar, but back in the day, this was what he was diagnosed with. Also, they felt that he fitted a classification of infantile personality. So that's better known as immature personality disorder now. And they actually said that he was literally obsessed with getting revenge on people that he felt had wronged him. He's genuinely thinking about how he can get revenge on the people that he feels has slighted him. And as I've said already, what is one of the areas of this man's life that he feels totally wronged within? His relationship with women. Then in 1963, he's aged 24 now, he manages to marry. With Darla, he does actually have 2 children with her. It doesn't actually curb his criminal behaviour at all. So he carries on with this criminal behaviour and he gets various convictions for petty theft. Then in 1968, he moves with his family to Anchorage in Alaska. And this, on the surface of it, seems like it's a new chance. It's a new start for Hansen. He's getting a lot of positivity in his environment now. I mean, he became completely obsessed with the whole area and the opportunity to go out and hunt animals that he didn't have options to do so in his prior residence. Now, his weapons of choice were either a rifle or a bow and arrow. So not long after Hansen's move to Anchorage, one of the things that also occurs, and pretty quickly, is that young women begin disappearing in and around the local area. But the authorities are not going to connect the dots for many years. And the problem with that is we now have a serial killer on the loose. We have a hunter who is an adept marksman, and he is running free, and I mean running free. So he gets arrested for attempted kidnapping at gunpoint of a real estate secretary. He also gets arrested for the abduction and rape of an 18-year-old prostitute, Sandra Patterson. And her abductor actually told her that he wanted to slash her bra with a knife. Also, he takes her to a similar area that Beth's body's found. Also, he stripped her to prevent her escaping. Also, like Beth, both of the girls were in their teens. So this is almost identical to the girl who's turned up dead. These are super serious offenses. But through plea deals, he basically gets sentenced to 5 years. He serves 6 months in prison. Is it just me? Or do we think that at times, women, particularly sex workers, were just considered fair game, throwing it out there? So he gets out, released on work release. So he's not being given any consequences whatsoever for this. Then in July 1973, we have 17-year-old Megan Emmerich. She just disappears in Seward. And she was last seen walking out of a dormitory laundry room. Never heard of again. She would be 66 years old. Now, due to his record, he gets again sentenced to 5 years, also diagnosed as bipolar, and he's actually ordered to undergo psychiatric treatment. Now, even though he's got 5 years, and we're talking about a rap sheet that is huge now, and there are serious issues that he's been taken into custody for previously, he actually serves 1 year. Yeah. This is after the Supreme Court reduced the sentence, and they say, just take lithium. That'll treat your mental disorder. It's actually really appalling to imagine that the authorities cannot understand that people who are bipolar are not killers, that this is not going to resolve the concern within this human being. The other thing is, even though they let him go and they're like, take your lithium, he doesn't have to, does he? No, because they haven't put anything in force to ensure that he takes his medication. Not that that would make a difference anyway. And the truth is, from what we discover later down the line, he certainly didn't take it. Then we get to January 1982 and he's doing okay. Probably through the insurance claims he's making up, but he buys himself a Piper Super Cub Bush plane. Henson's a really popular figure in the local community. Now he's considered a local businessman, family man, and he was definitely a chameleon. He was able to blend perfectly into society. So no one's got any idea who he really is, even the police. This guy's a sadistic killer, and he had been racking up kill counts for the last decade at this point. Now, at this time, Anchorage is a booming place because of construction and also the Trans-Alaska pipelines. You've got loads of construction workers there. They've all been attracted to the area because of good pay and the projects that were available. And in turn, that means that lots of workers and exotic dancers turned up because they knew that they could make money off them. Of course, that makes perfect sense. So, first of all, he's done the homework. He's done the maths. He knows that strippers and they're harder to track. They're less likely to be missed. And, you know, sudden disappearances of these individuals were also pretty common in the area. People came and they went overnight. And his MO was absolutely terrifying. So he'd solicit a prostitute, then he'd abduct them, take them to his home, he'd rape them, he'd torture them for hours. Then he'd take them to his plane, he'd fly them into the Alaskan wilderness, which we all know is incredibly cold. So it's in July 1980 when construction workers, they basically discover a shallow grave, and in it there are skeletal remains, and this is near Eklutna Lake Road. It's an unidentified victim, which becomes known as Eklutna Annie. But when the investigators look at her body and try to discern who she is and how old she is, they believe that she was between 16 and 25 years at the age of her death. She was killed by a single stab wound to her back. And later that same year, they find the badly decomposed body of 24-year-old Joanna Messina, and she's discovered in a gravel pit near Seward. So again, this is a girl who's just turned up, who's just been dumped. Then September 1983, body of 31-year-old Paula Golding. She again found in a shallow grave along the Nick River. And bear in mind, the area that they found this body is only reachable by boat or bush plane. They find a .223 caliber shell casing, which is found just nearby. They all seem to be quite similar individuals. Alaska State Troopers, at this point, finally, we could say, realize that they are not just dealing with random killings, which would be horrific anyway. They're dealing with a serial killer. And this serial killer clearly has a type. So the majority of the missing women or discovered victims, they were in the 20s, between 5'4" and 5'7". They weighed between 120 and 125 pounds, so they were all slim. Usually they were quite busty. So the survivor, who I talked about at the very beginning of this, Cindy Paulson, aside from her younger age, she also matched the victim type. Anyway, they get the FBI involved, and an offender profile at this point is compiled, and this is based on the 3 bodies that they've recovered. Now, the profile was pretty accurate. Concluded that the killer would be an experienced hunter, tick. with low self-esteem, tick. Have had a history of being rejected by women, tick, tick, tick. And would have committed arson and theft during life, tick, 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 tick. They also, this is pretty amazing, said that the individual might have a stutter. So that is a pretty accurate description of this individual. So at this point, the detectives search a list of suspects, and Robert Hansen, aka pen portrait of possibility as described by Profiler, who'd been dismissed essentially originally, he seems to fit the FBI profile to a T. Also, he owns the plane, which of course fits with the remote locations that these bodies have been found, and together with Cindy Paulson's details of the alleged attack that she went through, that fits the bill. So authorities now have a prime suspect, so they obtain a search warrant to search Hansen's property and plane. So in October 1983, the police execute a warrant to search Hansen's home, and wow, the police discover incredibly incriminating evidence, because they actually find jewellery that belongs to the women who've been reported missing. Also, if it's not bad enough that literally the belongings of the women who have been murdered have been found in his possession, and if that isn't incriminating enough, and I think it is, they're also able to find a large stash of weapons in a secret compartment in his attic. So at this point, 44-year-old Hansen's arrested, so he has nowhere to go apart from to say, I am 100% guilty. Of course he didn't. No, just denies everything. Also, during these interrogations, investigators believe that he could be responsible for far more killings than the 4 bodies that they'd currently recovered. So at this point, authorities decide that they're going to offer Hansen a plea deal. And they said, if you go with us on this deal, you'll be charged with just 4 murders. And also, they wanted to bring in Cindy's abduction and rape, rightfully so, that poor woman who had been so honest with the authorities and had been through the most horrific violation, and who was literally not believed, and who could have stopped all of these other deaths. She gets her day in court, essentially, they're saying. So finally, she's been taken seriously in this moment. But in return for this, he was going to have to give details of his other offences and victims. Anyway, we get to February 1984 and he pleads guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. This is in relation to Paula Golding, Joanna Messina, Sherry Morrow, and the unidentified Eklutna Annie. And he was sentenced at this point to 461 years without the possibility of parole. I don't know. Now, in accordance with that plea deal, Hansen ultimately confessed to 17 murders and 30 rapes over the previous 12 years. Hansen did lead authorities to grave sites, but only 12 of the bodies were actually recovered. Now, 11 of them were identified, but the identity of Eklutna Annie, still a mystery. It remains open today. When they searched Hansen's property, one of the things that they discovered were flight maps. There were hand-drawn crosses on it. Now, they actually matched the sites and locations of his victims' bodies, but there were more than 17 marks on it. Bear in mind, that's what he confessed to. There were 37 crosses in total. 2021, a victim of Hansen's, previously known as Horseshoe Harriet. She was finally identified after 37 years. So her body had been found at Horseshoe Lake, and they used genetic genealogy and a DNA match. And because of that, they were able to identify the body as that of 19-year-old Robin Pelkey. In August 2014, after he served 30 years, which is not enough, he died of natural causes at the age of 75. Wow, that's upsetting. He didn't even get a painful death, guys. Don't get me wrong. Truth is, he died and he took his true kill count to the grave. He would abduct his victims from a primary location, assault them at a secondary location, and hunt and kill them at a final location. That is very organised, and he tended